We'll be getting started in a couple minutes. So we're just going to plug you in, and there you go. And we're getting started right now.
Thank you all for coming tonight. See a lot of familiar faces, so welcome back. I see a lot of new faces, which is great. Thank you for joining us tonight on this beautiful rainy evening that we have. So my name is Julie Edwards. I'm a real estate officer with the Urban Redevelopment Authority of Pittsburgh, the URA, and we're here tonight to talk to you about the Lexington Technology Park site. So before we get started, I just wanted to turn the mic over to your District 9 Councilperson, Reverend Burgess. Come on up.
That's fine. I'm homegrown, right? This is the library. I work in Remax. I live a block from here and did all my homework here and love this building, right? Remember when I didn't tell that many old stories, but there was a caretaker. He used to be on the third floor. Now it's a ballroom again, but in my day, the caretaker lived there and he had a vegetable garden on the roof, a pot garden. He used to bake tomatoes and green stuff on the roof. Every now and then he would give us kids a little bit of his vegetables. So I'm old, I go back a long time. So a couple of things. I sent out a letter sort of telling you my perspective of what we need. I'm not necessarily pushing for any particular developer, but what the development should look like. And I sent a letter out. I do have extra copies if you happen to not want it. The only thing I will say is this, and this is the part that I think is most important, is that this Lexington development should not, in my opinion, be looked at as a project by itself. It should be looked at as a project that can be transformational, to come down Homewood Avenue into Homewood, and to go east from Lexington in redevelop, going down Thomas and down toward Wilkesburg. And so whatever we choose, we should be looking at this being transformational, so that at the end of the day, not only is Lexington redone, but hopefully Homewood Avenue is redone, and maybe going down Thomas Boulevard with a food call-up, that whole area is transformed into an entertainment district. And so we want a development there that can spur continuous development, not just be a project in and of itself. And so tonight, we've come to get more community comments. We've gotten 75 respondents back from the survey. This is another opportunity for you to give your comments, for you to look at the three housing proposals, and for us to sort of ask your questions about the proposals, because we want you to be clear and give us good feedback as what you'd like to see in the neighborhoods that we share. I have lived in Point Breeze for 30 years now, and my wife grew up there, so we're glad. I'm a homeowner there. And so I'm my own constituent. So it's good. My church is across the street, and I also grew up in Homewood. So I think I don't know what is this. We belong to two neighborhoods. What's that called? So I own property in Homewood. So I think I'm a little bit in both. So thanks to URA, thanks to our overseeing what he knows at the highest amount of respect in partners in this development work, and just welcome to Homewood. Glad that you're here. Thank you for the library for all that you do.
Thank you, Reverend Burgess. I'm going to go ahead and move this mic over here so that I don't move back to Shana. All right, so we have a couple URA staff members here tonight that I just wanted to acknowledge. We have our Executive Director, Robert Rubenstein. In the back taking photos, we have our new Equity and Inclusion Fellow, Maya Fuse. We have Clarence Healy over here, who is our Development Officer in the Real Estate Department. And we have Shana Madden, who's one of our Senior Project Managers in the Housing Department. Let's go ahead. Next slide, please. So tonight, we're going to start by giving an update on where we are to date in our RFP process. And then we're going to talk a little bit broadly about affordable housing in the city of Pittsburgh. We are going to allow for a breakout session, so if you guys haven't had a chance to review the revised proposals or fill out a survey, you have a chance tonight, and we're going to give you some time to do that. We're going to talk about the preliminary survey results, talk about some of our next steps, and then we'll open it up to public comment as always. Next slide. So the URA is a redevelopment authority. We were created in 1946. In 1945, the state of Pennsylvania passed some legislation called the Redevelopment Act, and that enabled the creation of redevelopment authorities like us. We are the first in the state of Pennsylvania and one of the first in the nation. We have a staff of about 90 people, and we are governed by a board of 5 directors who meet every single month, second Thursday of the month, 2:00 p.m. in the 13th floor of our building, 200 Ross Street. If you guys have never checked out a URA board meeting, I highly encourage you guys to do so. You can see all the great things that the URA does. So the URA's, that one. So the URA's mission is to serve as the City of Pittsburgh's economic development agency. So we work hard every day to help create jobs, to expand the city's tax base, and to improve the vitality of our Pittsburgh businesses and neighborhoods. We do that in a couple different ways. One way we do that is through real estate development. So we acquire sites that are underutilized, we assemble them into sites, and then we convey them for redevelopment. We have a housing department that does many different things. They're a gap financer for housing development. They lend to they have a loan portfolio of loan programs. They lend to existing homeowners to help them fix up their homes or help them buy new homes. We have a business development department that helps small to mid-sized businesses through a variety of loan and grant programs. And we have an economic development department at the URA that funnels a lot of state and federal funding and does some specialized financing to help redevelop areas in the city of Pittsburgh. So at the URA, we are very committed to equitable development, and we work to incorporate best practices for equity and inclusion into our internal and external policies and projects and activities. Slide. So outlined in yellow is the Lexington Technology Park site. That's why we're here tonight. It's located in the Point Breeze North neighborhood, and it's adjacent to the MLK East Busway. So this is a site plan. The total site is about 16.5 acres. For the purposes of the request for proposals that we issued, we broke it down into 2 parcels. So fronting North Homewood Avenue, we have what we're calling the North Homewood parcel. Currently, it's surface parking lot and has 2 vacant single-family structures. On the right side, we have the North Lexington parcel, and it fronts North Lexington Avenue. So here's Construction Junction right here, and then here's where Thomas Street intersects. So this site has 2 existing buildings. The URA acquired the site back in 1996. It was a property donation from the Rockwell Corporation, and they used to do some warehousing and manufacturing on the site. We have some current tenants in that, in Building 1, and Building 2 is currently vacant. So to talk a little bit about our process to date, back in 2011, the URA commissioned a study called Bridging the Busway. And what it did is we looked at the potential to build market strength in both the Homewood and the Point Breeze neighborhoods through what at the time was a brand new tool at the state level, a tax diversion program called Transit Revitalization Investment District, to see how we could build market potential through transit-oriented development. In 2014, we commissioned another study called the Homewood TOD study, Transit-Oriented Development Study. And again, we looked at using this new tool called a TRID to see if we could initiate transit-oriented development around the Homewood station. So in 2017, in July of last year, we went to our board of directors and we asked for authorization to release a request for proposals for this Lexington site. And our board said, yes, but we want you to do some more community engagement around this, and we want to do one RFP, and we want developers to have the opportunity to respond to all or a portion of the site. We don't want to see 2 RFPs. We want you to issue 1 and give developers the option. So the URA committed to a robust community engagement process for this project. In October of 2017, we worked with the Point Breeze North Development Corporation to conduct a community site tour of Lexington. And then starting in November through July, we hosted or attended monthly meetings to give updates on this project. In March of this year, we released the request for proposals. We left it out for about 8 weeks, and we ended up getting 7 responses in May. So we had a review committee that we formed comprised of community representatives, somebody from the Department of City Planning, somebody from the Mayor's Office, and somebody representing our elected officials and URA staff. And they helped us to evaluate those proposals and shortlist them. In June, we had the shortlisted developers come and present at a community meeting what their proposals were, and we got tons of community feedback. So following that June meeting, the review committee reconvened, and they said, you know, we want to see more public process around, or we want to see the redevelopers revise their proposals based on the public comment that we heard at the June meeting. After that, the review committee said, you know, we want to see more public process around the residential portion of the site. They were able to come to a consensus on the commercial side. However, our board has indicated to us that they want to entertain a motion on both sides of the site at one time. So right now, we're here to do additional public process to focus on just the residential portion, so just that North Homewood parcel. So a couple weeks ago, we released a survey ahead of time. We put the revised proposals on our Lexington website, and we asked you to review those revised proposals and tell us what you think, so that we could get some comments ahead of time and understand what the concerns were, what people liked, what people didn't like. So go ahead to the next slide, and that's where we are today. So if you haven't already, the city's Department of Innovation and Performance has created a website for us, the Lexington Technology Park website. So on here, you can go ahead and find information about the Lexington Technology Park itself. You can find information on the URA's disposition process, so how the URA sells land, and you can find information related to community outreach. All the presentations that we've done so far and all the meeting minutes are posted on this website. So if you haven't already, it's a really great tool, and I encourage you to check it out. And with that, that was pretty good timing. I'm going to invite my colleague Majestic Lane up here. He's going to give a little bit of a broad discussion about affordable housing. So Majestic is the Deputy Chief of Staff for Mayor William Peduto. Come on up, Majestic.
Good evening, everyone. Again, my name is Majestic Lane, Deputy Chief of Staff in the Office of Mayor William Peduto. Just wanted to come a minute and talk about kind of some of the things that are important to the administration, because I think in this conversation is when you see the work that the URA is doing and you see the things that we're striving for, kind of want to put it into context, what's important to us and what's important to the city and the region going forward. So one, just to talk a little bit about the timeline of affordable housing, and then I'll go from actually the city council legislation all the way to the Housing Opportunity Fund. In January 2015, city council legislation was introduced to create an affordable housing task force. I had the benefit of being on the task force, and in that process, I really learned a lot, and I think we went through a really good experience about really seeing the extent of what's happening in our city around the access to affordable housing and also the location of affordable housing, which is something I'll talk about in a second. In May 2015, the task force was established. In May of that year, also the recommendations were released. In 2017, we released executive orders. In executive orders, we can see, one, to provide and expand resources, policies, and programs to increase housing security. Two, to increase and improve the opportunities for public housing residents. Three, to increase mixed income and affordable housing opportunities across Pittsburgh. And number four, to preserve and protect public interest in existing mixed income affordable housing across Pittsburgh. And five, to improve our real estate tax incentives, abatements, and such to advance the public interest. And what's important about this, we know that it was some context with this around the Penn Plaza situation where, we saw for the first time, what they call classic gentrification, where people were displaced from their neighborhoods due to real estate deals. And we knew that as an administration that in order to have a city for all, we couldn't have a situation where this was happening. So we wanted to be able to take all opportunities going forward, again, to make sure we had increased mixed use and affordable buildings. Because one part of our affordable housing crisis and then resulting poverty crisis in our city is that a lot of our affordable housing tends to be in places that were done 50, 60 years ago. And we know that was to increase segregation and to reduce wealth on one side, increase wealth on another side. So we want to be able to think about that and take that into perspective when we look at going forward and how we build things. And so we get that, and then we actually get to, in December of 2017, we passed the Housing Opportunity Fund. The Housing Opportunity Fund is up to $10 million a year for the next 12 years to be able to do that to, serve a lot of purposes, but also one of them is to increase mixed income and affordable housing opportunities across the city, right? So one more thing I want to say is when we're talking about our interests is as follows. One, we know mixed income housing with a variety of incomes, a variety of people is good public policy. So we're not looking to have only one of any kind of group in housing anymore because we know, again, the last 50 or 60 years of it, so recently, it showed us what happened when we did not have mixed income housing, when we didn't have people of all kind of backgrounds being together. And number two, a public policy around transit-oriented development. We know that we have a busway that is really important as far as it pertains to getting people all over the region. And we know that transit-oriented development, in order for it to really work and to provide the value capture that you need to be able to make that work, you need a degree of density to get, the value capture to make the public infrastructure improvements and then also to make the infrastructure improvements in transportation. So those are some of the things that are important to us. We really appreciate this process and how it is going on and the fact that the neighborhoods have stayed so involved and have challenged us and made sure that we have to be thoughtful around what we do going forward and try to stay true to these values. And so if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Majestic.
Lord.
All right, so I mentioned briefly that we had we asked our residential redevelopers to revise their proposals. We're going to allow for some time to have a breakout session, but just first, Director Rubenstein is going to go over some of the major changes that we saw based on the public comment broadly on all three proposals. After that, we're going to give you some time to go ahead and look at the posters closely, and if you haven't already and you'd like to fill out a survey, we'll give you a chance tonight.
Thank you, Julie. Just before I give an overview of the three proposals as they've been revised, as they've been revised, one is not, I do want to give some thank yous. First off to Reverend Burgess and all the folks, not only the City Council, but that participated in the creation of the Affordable Housing Task Force, the Advisory Committee. See some of the members are in the room here that help advise and make recommendations on how that $10 million is deployed in the best possible way, meeting the objectives of the legislation. So thank you all for that, and thank you for putting your money where your mouth is. We all talk about these things, and through the Affordable Housing Fund, that will allow us to serve and support between 400 and 500 additional affordable low-income housing units in the year going forward here. I do want to acknowledge State Representative Gainey, who's a member of the URA Board of Directors also. Thank you for coming and for your leadership as well. I want to thank the library for hosting us and for relaxing the rules a little bit tonight on the food, so appreciate that. But most of all, I want to thank all of you. We started this process about a year ago this year. Many of the same faces that have been here and have been ardent participants, making sure their voices are heard, and, as Majestic said, holding us accountable. So thank you for that. Thank you for, I know tonight we're up against some competition with the Kavanaugh here, so thank you for coming out tonight, and hopefully we'll keep you to that. So all that said, the three developers on the housing side. So as we know, no one, well, I guess one team did submit for the entire site, but it was still broken up between a commercial portion and a residential portion. So it really allows us to look at the housing proposals and try to compare apples to apples as best we can. I will say all three of the developers of the housing proposals are capable developers. They've worked with all of them. They all have the capability to pull off these developments. So that's a good thing. I think at the end of the day, whatever the recommendation is, what the URA board decides, that there aren't going to be any losers because you're going to end up with a quality development. what we want to hear from you, as Reverend outlined at the beginning, is what is that development? So, you know, what we want to hear from the community, what are the principles that you want to make sure that we're taking into account as the review committee then makes their final recommendation, and then we can present that to the URA Board of Directors. So the overview of each of these three proposals. The first one, Lexington Partners, so as revised, their proposal is now 150 units, of which 125 of those would be rental, 25 of those would be for sale. Within the rental, the breakdown is market rate is 75 units and 50 units are proposed as affordable. So that's their breakdown of 125 that constitute the rental portion of the project. They're working, you can see their team members up there in the studio for spatial practices, the architect, Lines Construction and Integrity Construction is the contractor. And this is the proposal that is also partnered with a commercial developer for the larger portion on North Lexington, called North Lexington parcel, for commercial development. They're proposing that the Penn State Garden is maintained, and the target market is business owners and employees who work within the district. And they do plan to improve, make public improvements, extending McPherson, North Lexington, and Jonathan Street, so reconnecting some of the street and allowing access to the site that currently is not available. Next, we have a couple of images or renderings. Okay, so this one shows kind of their initial or their revised proposal would have apartment units toward the interior of the site. So this is the commercial building, the large building. There'll be an apartment building of approximately 100 units. Again, closest to the commercial and along the busway. As it moves toward North Elmwood Avenue, they're proposing there'll be townhouse development and additional townhouses on McPherson. So North Elmwood Avenue, again, moving in toward the apartment building is a series of townhouses. Those are a mix of rental as well as for sale. So about 25 of those are proposed as for sale on the townhouses, the others are rental. This is a rendering looking from Elmwood Avenue. So right here is North Elmwood Avenue, going toward the busway and the bus station. So you can see this proposal, they're proposing a series of townhouses along North Elmwood Avenue, moving toward the commercial portion, as well as some here on this street. And then the larger apartment building, the 100 unit, you see sitting closer to the commercial. I will say one thing, and this goes for all three of the proposals, is once a developer is selected, you'll hear this toward the end of the presentation today, that there's a substantial additional public process, both at the URA and then through city planning, the planning commission, zoning, where these designs are where they sit today, that there's still opportunities based on your input tonight, going forward over the next coming months, to continue to shape how the site lays out and how the design works. So what you're seeing today is kind of the best, as we sit here today, their best projection, but it's not set in stone. And none of the three are really set in stone, but these are kind of the final and best proposals at this time for consideration. Moving on to the next one. So Action Housing, they are teamed with 4080 Architecture and BCJ Architects. Their contractor is Martini Construction. They're proposing 120 units total of housing. Of those 100 would be rental apartments, and 20 would be for sale. In terms of the breakdown on the rental units, they are 100% affordable units. So all 100 of the rental units are proposed to be affordable in the Action Housing deal. On the for sale units, do you know, is there affordability? Okay, so on the for sale units, and I forgot to mention this on the previous proposal, I'm not sure we kind of metric. On the for sale, they're proposing that they be up to 180% of annual median income in terms of eligibility. Do you know the prior proposal? Lexington Partners? Market rate, although city planning knows that is what, essentially what units sell for in Northwood Breeze. You know what market rate is? For sale. For how many dollars? It's probably 400 potentially.
Yeah, I would say an exact sales price is to be determined at this point. They're still very preliminary, but their intent is whatever the market rate would be.
So on the action proposal, there are other additional information on the two existing houses. They are proposing to keep those and to move their offices into the site. They also have been having discussions with Escalita Cosius, I'm pronouncing that correctly, Spanish immersion preschool. They would be maintaining also the Penn State Garden. They propose a parklet on McPherson. Their target market is families, along with singles, couples, and seniors. And in terms of proposed infrastructure improvements, they propose also the extension of McPherson and North Lexington. So here, and all these images, by the way, are available on the wall if you want to look at it in closer detail. And if you've not already seen them from the website, I encourage you during the breakout to spend some time looking at each of them. So on this proposal, let's see here. So North Homewood Avenue is here, going toward Busman. The Homewood Station is at the top left corner on this map. They're proposing townhouses along North Homewood Avenue, and then a series of interior apartment buildings. These, vary, I guess, up to 4 stories. The apartment buildings, I think the townhouses are 2, 3 stories. They're also proposing the for sale units be on this little appendage parcel. Some proposals do not include this, and assume that this is going to be part of the commercial piece of the site. But the action proposal proposes some for sale units here along face Mead Street.
You're proposing for the code that little extension is regarding.
That's Penn State.
Okay, my error.
So the
Thank you for
townhouses are
clarification.
here, and then the flats are kind of behind the townhouses, and then this is the multi-family thing. Yeah.
So I apologize for that. So again, the townhouses would be the for sale piece. That's along the north end. And then behind the apartments. Thank you.
Is there a provision for parking? Is there back here?
No.
The parking
Parking.
below. Parking below.
Previous, was there parking below grade or was it ground level parking? So that would be.
The action housing, I don't believe,
Lexington parking, was that?
Lexington Partners, we can go back a couple slides.
Is there a parking?
There's-
One up on the right, one
depend upon what they find out during site exploration. So none of the developers have done a site exploration yet in terms of, is it practical to dig down what their environmental issues are concerned. So it could either be going down grade or at grade with the
That
residential.
would make a three-story building, a four-story building, and get parking at grade. Right, okay.
So the action housing proposal was not revised from the initial public meeting. So once all the community feedback came from that initial meeting, the action basically was comfortable with the proposal as is.
You're already in the low place.
Yeah, I asked something about action housing. Did I also read that with action housing, they prefer to have as little parking as possible, defer to mass transit as an alternative?
Yes, and their practice in other developments has been to, at times, request variances because of access to transportation, to public transportation, to not have the parking city code requires.
Most of their buildings are like 4 units or apartment rentals, well, affordable. It says 5 stories for one, 4 stories for the other. Quite a lot of height on this area. And no parking. And then, it says parking
Yeah,
below on every
these
level.
apartments,
Parking below on one and parking above on the same section. It's very small print. It does say it at the top, right-hand corner, where the parking is.
It'd be a good idea to have that, what's the actual number of spaces that you're proposing?
Says capacity 36 spaces, and the other one says capacity 70 spaces.
so
That's one thing.
it's a phase one and phase two.
The takeaway is that the parking is deliberately inadequate for the housing, which is why you're applying a variance.
So action is proposing 120 spaces.
They are proposing a one-to-one, but in practice, they often ask for variance to reduce the parking. But on this proposal, they're showing the one-to-one. And the next slide, this shows imagery of North Homeland Avenue.
So these are what the townhouses
So
look like.
these would be the for sale townhouses,
Are those
a
along
sample. This isn't exactly what they would build.
Are they 2 stories or 3 stories?
They are 2 acres from this. 2.5 in some cases. It looks like there's a little extension that covers them.
I wonder if they took along the topography of the area as it is now, because along Coleman Avenue, there is a 3 feet rise before you get into any of the parking, into the parking that's there now, along Pearson Avenue and so on. You have to go 3 feet, because there's a wall there.
Correct.
And
Yeah, it sits up, the site sits up a bit.
They're doing a lot of estimating.
Yeah, and I think that's something they would address if they got into the building. Yeah, it's a good point.
The third development is Beacon Communities Development, partnering with Fab this is a revised proposal. Their architect is Desmond Assist Architects, contractors Mystic Construction. What they're proposing is 176 total housing units, 148 approximately would be rental, broken down by 95 market rate, 53 units of apartments affordable. They're also proposing for sale units, totaling 28. So that makes up the 176. Again, broken down 148 rental, 28 for sale. They're also proposing some of the for sale units to be condominiums created in the 2 existing houses. So they would renovate those 2 houses and break them into multiple units through a condominium structure. That's along Main Street. They also would be maintaining the proposing a parklet playground on Pierce, or there's one here. They do have a pedestrian bike walkway that meanders through the site. Their target market is young professionals for the market rate and affordable units, and will respond to workforce housing demand. Their planned improvements are to extend McPherson. So we have kind of a difference between the three in terms of the proposed street extensions, all of them proposing to extend McPherson. This site, we don't really have a good detail breakdown, maybe when you look closer, hold it back when you are able to look closer at the maps. This really shows the commercial portion of the site. So the residential is up in that top left corner. But you can see they're proposing two structures. So along North Elmwood Avenue, come in for the commercial with two buildings. And then the third white mass that you see there is surface parking. What they're proposing that would support the residential units. And then you see the two existing houses that would be broken up into so on to the next slide is a rendering of what that would look like, and again, North Elmwood Avenue here, toward the busway. So you see two buildings, two apartment buildings, going to be 3 stories with kind of atriums going up an additional half level, probably elevator shafts, and then surface parking between the buildings and the commercial.
And they did reduce that front building, I think, down the story, and then the second one up the story, so it'd be closer to home and avenue.
On the previous, or several previous slides, there was a line about Mead Street frontage. What was that? What was that?
So
Back one more, right? That says along Mead Street frontage, that other information.
So Mead Street frontage is where the two existing houses are.
That's not Mead Street, that's not.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We mean part of the commercial.
No, you are.
Yeah, they're meaning part of it, they're gonna use.
Yeah. Yeah, so Mead, this is the proposal. I'm sorry, I mixed it up with action. This is the proposal that proposes additional townhouses for sale on Lakewood.
Yeah, so you'll see that they're actually proposing on the commercial portion of the site, and that's something that would have to be approved by the DEP and would have to be worked out with another developer of the commercial portion if they were the ones selected. So that's their idea, but there's a lot to work out on that corner.
So that's zoned for now, residential.
So the entire site is zoned UI, urban industrial, and we'll talk a little bit about that later, what that means. But the entire site is zoned urban industrial right now. We'll talk about what's allowed in the zoning code and what zoning changes might need to happen.
All right, thank you, Robert. So again, talked a little bit about this survey. So we released a simple 5-question survey a couple weeks ago. One way that it went out, Reverend Burgess sponsored a mailing, so thank you so much for sending that out to the residents. I think it got a lot of you here tonight probably. We sent it out a few different ways. Point Breeze sent it out in an email blast. We sent it out to our review committee to distribute to their networks. We shared it on social media, and we announced it at our board meeting. I think that's all the ways that we shared it. So we're going to offer some more opportunity right now. If you have not had a chance to fill out the survey, please do so. There's some extra copies right up here. So we're going to take maybe 15, 20 minutes. If you haven't had some sandwiches, help yourself. And then the posters are over here. Go ahead and take a look at them and fill out the survey if you have not already done so.
I'm gonna mute sound because I'm still gonna record live, and I don't know what anybody is going to say. Okay, we are about to get started again. How's the breakout? Everybody had time to discuss panels and the board and some of the plans.
All right, we can all
So
find
now
our seats.
we're going to come back to the feed.
All right, so to date, we've received 75 surveys, and we're going to go over the preliminary survey results tonight. We're so happy to get additional survey results in this box tonight. If you guys haven't put them in this box, or we'll take them in that box over there, those will be compiled and incorporated into public comment to be shared with the review committee. So we, as you saw, sent out the 5-question survey, and we're just going to go over the preliminary results tonight. So, of the 75 responses that we got, 58% of them live in the neighborhood. They're either a current homeowner or a current tenant. So 50% were homeowners and 8% were tenants. An additional 36% either work or frequent the neighborhood. So we got a good mix of responses. We had, people that lived in the neighborhood and then people that spent a lot of time in the neighborhood. So this is the makeup of who filled out the survey so far. The second question that we asked was, which rent ranges for a 1 or 2 bedroom would you like to see offered in the housing development at Lexington? And I'm going to note that you could select all that apply because those numbers do not add up to 75. So they could select more than one. So you might have been wondering why we asked this question. So we were hoping to better understand what rent levels were expected at this site. Sometimes there's a disconnect between what affordable housing is and what a rent price is. So we started by asking the question about rent prices. So generally speaking, we saw that people responded to multiple options, which indicated to us that they wanted to see different incomes at this site, so a mixed income development. So you also might be wondering how we came up with these rent ranges. We'll go to the next slide. Shayna and I looked at the Pennsylvania Housing Finance Agencies, which is the people that give out the low-income housing tax credit. We looked at their income limits for 2018 in Allegheny County. If you attended Point Breeze's affordable housing discussion a couple months ago, this is the exact chart that's in their PowerPoint. It's the exact same numbers. So we looked at different rent prices and came up with our question to see what different affordability levels there were. So just a couple examples. So somebody that is a 2-person household who makes $32,000 a year, so we're going to go over here. They're below 60% of the area median income, so they would be right here, 2-person. They could afford a 2-bedroom unit at $1,026 per month. So we rounded and said $1,050, but this is what a rent would look like in this income range with this household size under the low-income housing tax credits program. We'll leave this up a second just so you guys can look at it. I tend to move a little bit quickly.
I have a question. Are you saying this is what Section 8 pays? What does this mean?
So all 3 of our residential developers are proposing using low-income housing tax credits. So low-income housing tax credits are awarded from the federal government to housing finance agencies at the state level. Developers then apply for those credits, and those credits are awarded to developers, their credits on their federal income taxes. So to do so, they have to adhere to certain rent ranges and certain income levels. Does that make sense?
It's a, you're saying to obtain tax credits, they have to apply, I think.
Yes, exactly.
Question, on your chart right there, or the LIHTC, is it the 4% chart or the 9, or is there a difference between the 4% and the 9%?
The income levels should still be the same for them, but all 3 of our developers are dependent on the 9% low-income housing tax credits. So that's the one that's competitive once a year at the state that developers apply for and hope to get awarded.
Thank you.
Sure.
Question. So these are the income guidelines for the tax credit. Has it taken into consideration what a person has to earn to be able to afford that type of rent?
So what it looks like, it looks at your gross annual income per household, yeah. So it looks at how many people live in the home and what they earn, what the total gross income is earned, and then they base their rent prices off of that.
Because the National Low Income Housing Coalition has statistics that say for a two-bedroom household, you have to earn X amount of dollars. So I'm trying to figure out, does that take into that consideration?
So these are focused on, they break down their income by county. So these are focused on Allegheny County since we're in Pittsburgh, which is in Allegheny County. So they might be looking at probably a national statistic and national.
No, it's broke down for Pennsylvania too.
Yeah.
So that, and the reason why I asked the question is because those are broad-based statistics. Because it's not realistic, the wage compared to the amount of rent. So that's what I'm getting at. So you have a two-bedroom unit that rents for it, says that you should be able to do this, but in reality, that's not the case. That's all I'm saying.
Okay. Yeah, guidelines. All right, and then we'll give one more example. So a one-person household who makes $20,000 a year, so they're over here, so they're above 20% of the area median income, but they're below 40, so they'll follow the 40% guidelines. They can afford a one-bedroom unit, and their monthly rent price under the low-income housing tax credits program would be $570 per month.
So a question again, please. So in regards to the chart, your question says what rent raises for a one-bedroom would you like on? So if someone was saying, hey, I would like to have pay $650 a month for a one-bedroom, but didn't take into consideration. So I think that the question might have been a little bit unbalanced.
Sure, so our intent was to see what types of rent ranges we wanted to see offered, what you wanted to see offered at the site. Right?
So I would like to see that done, and then really $500.
So the third question that we asked was, what do you like best about these revised proposals? You guys were great. You gave us really specific answers, which really helped us to understand. So I have a couple of the quotes in different colors here just to help break it out. So in general, respondents of the survey to date have been very supportive of green space, very supportive of a range in housing options, so mixed income housing, which is consistent with the Point Breeze North neighborhood statement, having both a mix of rental and for sale units on the site. And then we heard that you guys really liked seeing the townhouses, and especially buildings that are in scale with the neighborhood where the neighborhood connects. So especially along Homewood Avenue is what we heard in general from the respondents. Those are what you liked about the proposal. We also asked you what you liked least about the proposals, and we did hear some concerns. So in general, we heard that respondents were not supportive of a development that may only have one income range. So something that was not, they didn't want to see something that was 100% market rate, and they didn't want to see something that was 100% affordable. They want to see some type of mixed income development. And again, that's consistent with the Point Breeze North neighborhood statement.
Like with affordable housing, international housing, they talk about a range of 20 to 40%. If you actually select the tenants to kind of cover based on the living side of the income, you would end up in a sense with this income, meaning people would make 10,000, 20, 30, all the way up to possibly 60,000. So I think it's kind of, it's an overgeneralization of say affordable housing. It doesn't imply it's like one level of income. It's not.
No, it's not. So the PHFA issued some new guidelines this year that allows for this income averaging that it looks like Action Housing wants to take advantage of. So historically, the low-income housing tax credits, you needed to be at or below 60% of the AMI. And this year, they're offering some new guidelines where you can go up to 80% of the AMI, but I think your total average of everybody that lives there needs to be at 60% of the AMI. Is that correct?
Excuse me, there's a problem with the fact that might be state or what they're really getting at is a lot of the they made their own determination, and that not Action House did all the determination. So I think they might have meant not that the income level was arranged, but the fact that the opportunity to do market level purchasing.
So something else that we heard that residents didn't generally like, or respondents of the survey so far, they didn't like seeing large-scale, boxy, what we'll call suburban-looking buildings. They wanted to see, this is an urban environment, they want to see something that's integrated into their neighborhood. And then another concern that we heard was density. So adding these units and having people drive through their neighborhood, they were concerned about traffic and parking. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Demi's actually going to talk a little bit about how the city will address what buildings look like and how they deal with traffic and parking in developments. So the fifth and final question that we asked in this survey was, what would you change about each proposal and how would you change it? So in general, one thing that we heard is respondents really want to see strong connections. They want to see strong connections to the transit station, so to the Homewood Station and the MLK East Busway. And they want to see strong connections in their neighborhood. So they want it to be well integrated into the neighborhood. So just something that we want to discuss is, when you have a higher density, there's a trade-off or an opportunity there. So when you have a higher density or you have more private investment, you have the opportunity to leverage public infrastructure improvements through a tax diversion. So one way to make strong connections is to leverage those private investments into public infrastructure improvements, and that could benefit the whole neighborhood. So it could reconnect your street grid, as some of the proposals were saying and Robert was talking about. And it could allow you to get to the Homewood Station quicker and easier. If your street grid is more functional, traffic will move faster, traffic won't be as congested. So something else that we heard, green space. Residents want to make sure that the green space meets the needs of the neighborhood. They don't want it to duplicate existing assets, and they want it to help meet the whole neighborhood. And again, another thing that residents would want to see, or respondents would want to see changed about each proposal is density, so parking and scale and design. So it sounds like residents, want to make sure that this development doesn't flood the streets with on-street parking, that it parks itself, and that it fits in with the neighborhood. So I'm going to bring up Demi. We're going to do a little baby switcheroo, so just give us 1 minute. Demi is a neighborhood planner at the Department of City Planning, and she focuses in the East End. And she's going to come talk a little bit about the zoning code and how city planning will reviews new developments.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yes, I am Demi. This is Journey. She likes to interrupt her mama, so we'll see how this goes. But so I work for city planning. I do not work directly in the zoning department. I tried to do a little Q&A with them to get some quality information to bring to you guys. But my role as a neighborhood planner is to kind of do this, facilitate conversations between community groups and developers. So based on the survey results, I just wanted to hit some high-level things that we heard. The first thing is height. So, and one thing, if anyone has ever looked into the zoning code, there's a lot of room for interpretation. So I'm going to start with the caveat that until we have a specific application that has been submitted to zoning, this could all vary, but based on kind of what we've seen from the proposal so far. The zoning, as Julie mentioned, is urban industrial, UI. And so it is currently 60 feet or 4 stories is allowed by right. In addition to that, one of the things that kicks in is residential compatibility. We know that the surrounding area is residential. It's not all zoned urban industrial. So I can get into a little bit of what that means, but let's see here. So some of the things that they will look at is the setbacks. So in urban industrial, for example, there can be a 0-foot front setback, a 0-foot rear setback. When residential compatibility is taken into account, there would need to be a 50-foot front setback and a 15-foot rear setback. So those are just some examples of how, due to there being a residential zoning adjacent, there's a little bit of a scaling that is taken into account when residential compatibility kicks in. Because the site is within 1,500 feet of what is called a major transit facility, which the busway is identified as, there is actually a bonus that can occur. So instead of having a 3-to-1 Florida area ratio, there can be a 4-to-1 Florida area ratio, which means that they can either build out a little extra or up a little extra. The confusing thing, what I was trying to understand from the zoning department, is how do residential compatibility and the transit facility bonus work within one another? How do they complement each other? How do they work against one another? And the answer I was given to that was, well, we have to see the actual application and proposal in front of us to understand it better. But again, those are just some things that can impact the height that will be allowed on the site. So the parking, according to the zoning code, for residential purposes, it is a minimum of one space required for every 1 unit, and the maximum allowed is 2 spaces per 1 unit. So I put up here something that is most developers now take into account, especially in the East End when they're looking at development, is that the number of total parking spaces can be reduced by 30% when they provide bicycle parking. In addition to that, they can reduce that number by petitioning to the zoning board to reduce that minimum. So there are avenues where the minimum 1 space per unit can be reduced just by providing bicycle parking, and then there's an additional reduction that can occur if they do petition successfully to the zoning board. We've heard a lot about green space, so I wanted to just, like I said, broad stroke on landscaping and screening. So for every 30 feet of street frontage that the building has, there has to be 1 street tree planted. And then any trees that are removed on the site that are 12 inches or greater in diameter have to be replaced with that same total amount of diameter on that site. And then in addition to that, there's screening, and it gets really in-depth into screening, so I just broadly put screening, but different mechanisms of landscaping for parking, waste removal, outdoor storage, and loading are also required. So if you remove 2 trees that are each 12 inches in diameter, let's say, so you are removing 24 total inches of diameter, you have to then plant 24 total inches in diameter. So you could do, 3 trees each 8 inches in diameter, you could do 12 trees each 2 inches in diameter, so that calculation, they usually work with the city forester, Lisa Chaffee, to kind of develop a plan, yeah.
Debbie, can you go back to the slide with the zoning variance, please, for 1 quick second, thank you. Okay, on parking, so if you take and add a street to, like an access street, is there a requirement on the width of what the street needs to be?
Yes, and it varies. So there are alleys, there are streets, and I'm trying to think now of the standard, but so there are different definitions, so it depends what the use of it would be, and if it would be a private street or a public street. One of the things that whichever developer selected is they'll have to have a meeting with DOMI, the Department of Mobility and Infrastructure. That exact question you're asking used to be housed within city planning. It's now moved to DOMI, so that will be probably one of the first things that developer has to do is have a scoping meeting with DOMI to talk through some of those more specifics.
So just to piggyback off of that, is there an Is there a classification for an access street?
An access street, not off the top of my head that I know of.
Okay, thank you. You answered my question.
Generally speaking, it's my question to you, from what the developer is saying, are these developed spaces going to be private parking spaces, or are they going to be public services?
I'm
Meaning
not
the
sure.
park space,
So,
or meaning
for
the
example,
roads?
if you extend Van Pearson and Jonathan, well, obviously those would become territories, right? Or are they considering the development private, meaning they actually said, well, you can't do it.
Remains to be seen, so, the city will have certain standards if you want to get the reopen a street to be a public street, and then there are also private streets in the city. So I think it remains to be seen, that's something our developers will work through. I think some are proposing public streets and some may be proposing private streets, yeah, but it's something that they'll get into, it's a great question. So Debbie and I just wanted to touch on, how the URA's process is going to work and how the city's process will work, and highlight some of the opportunities for public comment. So as I said in the beginning, the URA is a redevelopment authority, and we're established under the Redevelopment Act. So that Redevelopment Act spells out a special way that we have to sell or dispose of our property, and we call that our disposition process. So our disposition process is a series of board actions, and there are a total of 25 steps and 4 board actions. We are on step 2 of 25. We are still very early in the process. And to speak broadly about our disposition process, the main takeaways are it is a series of board decisions. These are not decisions that staff is making in our offices with the doors closed. These are happening in public meetings. So our board meets the first Thursday of every month, and again, second Thursday of every month at 2:00 p.m. in the 13th floor of our building. So if you haven't attended, I highly encourage you to attend our board meetings. One of our board members is actually here tonight listening to you guys. So the other main takeaway that I want you guys to understand is the URA does not sell on land speculation. We will not sell, we will not actually convey the property, we will not sign a deed until the project is shovel ready, until it has building permits, until it has stamped architectural drawings, until the financing is in place, debt and equity are secured on the property, and until it has gone through our disposition process, which includes community engagement, which includes a sustainability review through our P4 checklist, which includes an MWBE plan, a minority and women-owned business plan. So I'm highlighting up on here opportunities for public engagement. So we're hopeful that we can take this to the October board with a recommendation. Our board will be the second Thursday of the month, 2:00 p.m. We're very hopeful that we could make a recommendation as soon as October. All 3 of these redevelopers, as Robert has said, has worked with the URA before. They know what our process is, and they know what is expected of them. They know that they need to do significant community outreach, and they've all committed to doing so. So they'll come back out and they'll work with the community to incorporate your input, but to also create a project that is able to be built and able to be financed. So in here you can see we'll have several opportunities for public comment, and Debbie, if you go to the next slide. We'll have 2 other board meetings before closing. So we'll have 3 total public meetings that you're welcome to attend, and the developer will be back out to the community. So Demi's gonna come on up, we're gonna tag team one last time, and she's gonna talk about the city's process and how they review projects.
One question, you're talking about October 11th, would that be a decision for both the commercial and both Lexington and Homewood?
Our hope is that our board will entertain a recommendation for both sides of the site.
But we haven't seen the plans for the commercial.
You have, they were presented at the June
Right,
meeting.
but I mean, for this meeting today.
No, we just wanted, the review committee asked us to focus on just the residential portion. So the proposals are on the website if you haven't seen the commercial proposals.
Okay, so just going to touch a little bit. So Julie just talked about how the public still has opportunity to provide feedback through the URA process. So I'm going to touch a little bit on how the public can still provide feedback through the city's process. So as I mentioned before, the zoning is urban industrial. So multi-unit residential, which all 3 of these proposals are all allowed through a special exception. Now, a special exception means that all of these developers will have to go before the zoning board. Okay, so what does that mean? So the zoning board is a public hearing process, and here's some information about it. So anytime a developer applies to go before the zoning board, they have to give 21-day notice in advance. And there are numerous ways that they give that 21-day advance notice. The first way is that city planning sends out an agenda electronically. Anyone can get onto that list to receive that agenda. You can just leave me down after, and I'll make sure that we get you on that list. City planning also posts the agenda on the city planning website. The applicant, so the developer, actually has to take posters. They're these big, huge orange posters that announce the hearing date, time, and location. They have to put them on the site, so they'll put them at Lexington, and they have to take pictures that are time and date stamped that show that they put them up 21 days in advance at the site. City planning also mails out notices to any abutting property owners. And then city planning encourages the applicant to reach out to neighbors and community groups. So that all happens before the public hearing. At the public hearing, they're always held Thursday mornings. They usually start at about 9. They can go up until 2 p.m. depending on how big the agenda is that day. But they're always Thursday mornings. The public is invited and encouraged to attend to testify on the project. These are open to anybody. You don't have to live right next door, right? I mean, it might be most impactful to those who live right next door, but they are open. There's an open, everyone's able to provide their feedback at those meetings. In addition, community groups can send letters in advance. And then also, we encourage them to actually be present at the zoning board with those letters to testify. So the zoning board from that Thursday morning has 45 days to make a decision. If their request is granted, then they receive a zoning voucher, and then we shoot them over across the hall to PLI, Permits, Licensing, and Inspection, which was BBI before, and they can proceed to apply for a building permit. So that means that at that point, they've kind of made it through the city zoning process, and then they move over to the city building process, which gets more into the interiors of the building, windows, fire alarms, access, things like that. However, if the applicant is denied, they have 30 days to appeal to the Court of Common Pleas. And something I just wanted to note is, even if a decision is granted, it may be with conditions. So the zoning board might say, yes, we're saying you can build this 120-unit multi-residential. However, because we heard X, Y, and Z, we want you to include X and Y, because those are reasonable requests. So I just wanted to note that as well. Okay, so in addition to going through the zoning process, through the Board of Adjustment, there's also a process that's happening at the same time called site plan review. So most projects of scale need to go through site plan review. And this is a process where the developer would have to submit an actual application, and that's what I was referencing before when I said, here's what zoning thinks could apply, but they won't really know until they have that physical application in their hands that has the full site plan drawn out. So they have to submit that application with a site plan and a landscaping plan, and then they are encouraged to have a pre-application meeting. She's like, all right, Mom, pick it up. They are encouraged to have a pre-application meeting. At this time, it's not required, but most developers do because it's in their benefit. That would mean that developers get to sit down across the table from zoning and kind of say, okay, here's what we're proposing. Can you help us troubleshoot this? What do we really need to be looking at? What do we need to take into account here? What did we miss? And then at that time is when the zoning administrator will make a determination if the project will need to go proceed to planning commission or not during that site plan review process. And while site plan review is happening, there's also design review occurring. So they're just different staff people doing these functions. The first step is once they submit this full development review application, they will also include staff design review in that. So that is where city planning staff and the zoning department sit down And they actually delve into some of these bullets right here. The developer will have to provide a location map, surrounding photos of the neighborhood context, elevations with all sides of the project and materials that they're going to be using. They'll have to provide a landscaping plan, streetscape rendering that again show the building in context, some massing studies that kind of demonstrate, looking at it in a 3D model. What does this building look like? And then perspectives of the project from a human scale. So if you're walking down North Homewood and you're like, what does it look like when you look up into the sky, right? And at this time, there are urban design targets set. So when they're looking at it, they're saying, okay, does this fit within the context of the neighborhood? Do these materials make sense? Are they durable? Are they lasting? And if any of those answers are no, they'll actually set design targets and respond back to the developer and say, these are some benchmarks that you need to hit for this development. Now, some projects stop there at staff design review, smaller scale projects. However, because this is such a sizable development, it will actually go through one more additional process, which is CDAP, Contextual Design Advisory Panel. So this is a forum of architects, landscape architects, building professionals, that sit down with the developer, and the first thing they look at is did they meet their urban design targets that were set for them. And then in addition to that, they'll also make recommendations to improve and refine the design. So one of the things that they're always looking for, I kind of touched on this already, is just the context, right? You never want it to look like a spaceship is just like dropped into the middle of your neighborhood. So how does it blend? How does it feel? And then, one more point. And then it says they are doing something new now, whereas this is not happening before. So community groups are actually encouraged to submit letters to the Contextual Design Advisory Panel stating their what they like, what they don't like, what their thoughts, if they support it, why they don't support it if they don't, and some of those factors. So those are some other areas for public input as well.
So I do have a question regarding that. My question is, how much weight does the letters have from the community groups or the residents? What do they take into consideration?
So I would say with zoning board, they're taken very much into consideration. Oftentimes, I mean, it's happened before that even the hearings have been postponed because there's clear discrepancy and it's very visible that, okay, there hasn't been enough conversation around this, right? So I do think at zoning board, there's a lot of community-minded people at the table. They're very thoughtful about how they take feedback into account. With CDAP, the letters that they submit, I don't know if I can speak on that. They've just started doing that right before I went on maternity leave. So I don't know what the response has been for that. I know community groups have been submitting, but I don't know the level to which their comments are kind of elevated and benchmarks are set based on that.
So do they give feedback on the comments that the community groups put out?
What was
Is there
that?
any type of feedback from the panel regarding what the community?
Oh, yeah, the letters are presented there at the meeting, and usually, the staff person who's in charge of this process, Will Gregory, oftentimes kind of sets the agenda based on those. So that they're discussed within the CDAP meeting.
Do individuals also have the ability to submit these letters, or is it just limited to community groups?
I can check on that. I'll find out and let Julie know, and maybe that's something that we could post, because I think this will go on the website, right? So maybe we can post that as well.
Probably early next week.
Yeah, Ms. Holland?
Can the public get a copy of the plans that were submitted for review, or those other documents? And at what point in time, at what point are they?
So as soon as, if you go back a slide, forward a slide, that was the right one. So as soon as the zoning and development review application has been submitted, it's public. The very first bullet. So before it goes through any of the other things, so it's public, almost immediately. You can go down to 200 Rush Street, the third floor, zoning department, get a copy.
I'm sorry, one more question. Is that a copy of the stamp or just a preliminary?
Typically, when they submit, it's a full submission. Sometimes they do have to make tweaks to the development, or they desire to make tweaks to the development as they're going through design review, as they're going through some conversations with the zoning. They might find that if they do provide X number of car spaces, they don't have to go through an additional hoop. So they might change something like that, for example, while they're going through this site plan review process. But at the time of submission, it would be their full plan. I believe so.
Just one more question, Demi, I'm sorry. What is currently the city's setback requirements? It was changed, at some time it was 10 feet back or 25 feet back?
So it depends on the zoning district. Each zoning district has a different setback requirement. So this is urban industrial, and for the front and rear, it's 0. For the side, it is, interior and exterior is 10.
But then are they changing the zoning to allow residential housing? So it would not be urban industrial, it just.
So it would be urban industrial, they would get a special exception in order to build multi-family residential. So, like and even within the residential districts, there's a varied, depending on the setback, some are 10, some are 15, just depending on how dense the residential is as well.
Thank you.
Based on everything that I've seen, what's the time frame before something happens?
If you want to speak on, I guess I can just speak briefly on, from the city's perspective. Once the developer is selected, and Julia talked about that in a second, but once the developer is selected, I would think they would have gotten to the point pretty much through conversations through their development of getting to the point of being ready to submit to zoning. At that point, site plan review can take anywhere from 6 weeks to 4 months. I mean, it varies. I've seen projects take 8 months.
Are they this complex to be a year away or 2?
Yes, absolutely. And, taking into account zoning board and the threshold, the time thresholds required with that, if it should have to go before planning commission. So just on the city side, yeah, absolutely, it could take that long.
At what point can development submit tax point
So we've seen,
So the Pennsylvania Housing Finance Agency, for the 9% round, which all of these developers have indicated that's the financing that they're going to apply for, it usually happens in the fall. They've missed the deadline for this year. It varies month by month, but this year they're due in November, and we expect an award sometime in the spring.
No, but I was asking, this whole process actually, before they apply?
Before they can apply to,
They would have to have at least preliminary exclusive negotiations with the URA and a lot of the design work done to submit to the state, along with their financing plan.
I mean, is it possible that the developers submit in November?
no, so not this year.
I was trying to 2019.
Yeah, so PHFA requires a pre-application, which was due in August, and then the full application is due in November.
So I apologize, I want to give contact information because we're running out of time. We're going to take questions for another 5 minutes, but we do have to be out of the room. So I encourage you, if you're not able to get a question in, send it to us and make sure it's recorded. And when we post on the website next week, the minutes from tonight's meeting, we will include all that information as well, questions and answers. Yes, sir.
For all of this last administration will be on the website.
Yeah, it'll be on the Lexington website, not our website.
Okay, including the survey results?
Survey results?
We haven't finished compiling them yet.
When they're compiled. So we have everything up to what we received tonight. Okay. Other questions?
Well, I just wanted to say thank you all so much for coming. Thank you to our elected officials for continuing to support and be engaged. Thank you to all of our residents. Your input is so important to us, and we look forward to continuing to work with you guys on this process. So thank you for coming. And Thank you to the library. This is such a great space, and I'm so glad to be able to use it.